Hey everybody, welcome to this week's episode of Gary Talks. There's something that I complain about a lot, and I'm sure a lot of you complain about a lot, and that's the number of sequels we get each year. It seems year in and year out, it's sequel after sequel after sequel, and sure, while this year there are still a lot of sequels, we're also getting a lot of prequels. And that's what I'm going to talk about today. So that's what I'm going to talk about today, and I have a jam-packed show for you. Not only am I going to go over my favorite prequels in movies and television, I have a lot of guests lined up here to talk about their new prequels as well. From A Quiet Place Day 1, I have producer John Krasinski and one of the stars, Joseph Quinn, which some of you know him as Eddie from Stranger Things. From Strangers, Chapter 1, I have director Renny Harlin, and from The First Omen, I have director Arkasha Stevenson. But before I start ranking my favorite 10 movie prequels, let's hear from the producer of A Quiet Place Day 1, John Krasinski. So off the top, exactly what was it that made you want to do a prequel to A Quiet Place?
I actually had the idea for Day 1 when I was writing Quiet Place Part 2, because when I wrote the opening for the Abbott family going through the circumstances of the first alien invasion, I thought that would be an amazing story point to drop into the real world in New York City and see how the whole rest of the world was dealing with it. And certainly under probably more extreme circumstances, being arguably the loudest city in the world, and how people would respond to that in great numbers.
Oh, so you set it in New York City so that it would be the opposite of A Quiet Place.
But also the bond that New Yorkers have, that there is a group mentality to being in New York. And would people assist and help each other, or would they completely leave each other in the dust and run for survival of their own?
I thought A Quiet Place Day 1 was fantastic, but what really elevates it to a whole new level is the performance of Lupita Nyong'o.
Lupita is one of those actresses who's going to make any single role or any single movie better, period, the end. And I think that it's because of her specificity. I think she's a very, very powerful actress, a very powerful presence. She's able to communicate such deep emotion in such a unique way, and it's just such a joy to watch. And what she did with this was not only incredibly difficult physically, but it was also incredibly difficult mentally. You know, to put yourself in that position, to be terrorized for what we did in Quiet Place 2 for about 12 minutes, she had to do for the entire movie, and she did it so brilliantly and so elegantly.
And the other standout person is a guy who's going to be on the show a little bit later, Joseph Quinn.
We were so lucky to get Joe to do this movie, because I think everyone's offering him every movie on the planet right now. And I just thought he's so technically sound and so talented. And then in this movie, yet again, it's that idea of it's very difficult to play the worst day of your life and not let it feel too big or too melodramatic. And the way to do that is to be extremely talented and be able to walk a razor's edge, which is, I believe, what he played so well, which is that fight or flight thing, which is there are moments where you can see the overwhelming nature of the day hit him, and then the specifics of the tiniest thing, which is this friendship with Lupita that is burgeoning right here in front of our eyes. He gets to play the specifics of how much that means to him. So all those colors and variations he played so well, and so that to me is the two of them are the heartbeat of the movie.
Thank you so much for coming back on the show. It's always a pleasure. A Quiet Place Day 1 is a perfect example of a prequel done right. And speaking of prequels done right, let's get into what I think are the top 10 movie prequels of all time. I'll start right off with the one that's going to make a lot of you mad, and you're going to say, how can you rank this as number 10 when it is one of the greatest movies ever made? But it's the simple fact that it's both a prequel and a sequel. Had it been just a prequel, it would have been number 1, but because it is technically not a solid prequel, I had to move it down the list, but it still has to be on it. And that's The Godfather Part 2. So we'll just talk about the prequel portion of Godfather Part 2, where we see the rise of Vito Corleone and his transformation from a wide-eyed Sicilian immigrant to a cunning crime boss. Robert De Niro perfectly captures the essence of the young Vito, showcasing the character's evolution from a humble, family-oriented man to a force to be reckoned with in the New York underworld. What makes the prequel portion of The Godfather Part 2 so compelling is its ability to humanize a character who, in the original film, was already an established and feared crime lord. We see the man behind the myth, the struggles he faced, and the sacrifices he made to provide for his family. It's a poignant and powerful exploration of the American dream, albeit through the lens of organized crime. Coming in at number 9 is the most recent prequel on my list, and that's Pearl. Set in the sun-soaked fields of 1918, Ty West's prequel to X follows Pearl, played with intensity by Mia Goth, as she navigates the murky waters of her own sanity. With dreams of stardom dancing in her head like sugar plums, Pearl finds herself caught between the drudgery of farm life and the tantalizing allure of the silver screen. As the film unfolds, we're treated to a series of increasingly deranged vignettes that showcase Pearl's descent into madness. Pearl is a prequel that stands on its own, a haunting portrait of a woman on the brink of madness and the lengths she'll go to achieve her dreams. When it comes to prequels, some are more obvious than others. You have a character we already know and it shows how they got there. Maybe it shows their family earlier, something like that. But then there are prequels that just happen to be a story told before the last one we saw. And a lot of us wouldn't even know it was a prequel if someone didn't tell us it was. That is the case with number 8, a movie that I certainly didn't know it was a prequel when it was released, and that's Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. Directed by Steven Spielberg and featuring Harrison Ford in his iconic role, this prequel to Raiders of the Lost Ark takes a darker and more intense turn. The film starts with a high-octane chase in Shanghai and spirals into a gripping tale involving child slavery, human sacrifice, and a mystical quest for sacred stones in India. The film's standout moments include the nerve-wracking minecart chase, that disgusting snake-filled lunch, and the heart-stopping bridge showdown. Sure, it's no Raiders or even Last Crusade, but Temple of Doom remains a thrilling chapter in the Indiana Jones saga, showcasing Spielberg's flair for crafting unforgettable cinematic adventures. Next up is the first remake of a prequel on the list. Back in the mid-80s, Michael Mann made a movie called Manhunter, which featured a serial killer played by Brian Cox called Hannibal Lecter. A few years later, Jonathan Demme made Silence of the Lambs, with Hannibal Lecter, this time played by Anthony Hopkins. Later on, everyone demanded they wanted to see what Manhunter, or Red Dragon as the book was called, would have been like with Anthony Hopkins. And we got the number 7 movie on my list, Red Dragon. I know it's cool to say that you prefer Manhunter, but I've never been cool. I love Red Dragon, especially because you get Anthony Hopkins and Edward Norton going head-to-head. Red Dragon, the same as Manhunter, serves as a prequel to the iconic Silence of the Lambs. Edward Norton stars as FBI agent Will Graham, a gifted profiler lured out of retirement to track down a brutal serial killer known as the Tooth Fairy, played greatly by Ralph Fiennes. Anthony Hopkins reprises his role as the sinister Dr. Hannibal Lecter, offering a masterclass in controlled menace. The dynamic between Lecter and Graham is a tense dance of intellect and danger, with Hopkins' calm yet terrifying presence adding a layer of dread. While it may not reach the iconic status of its predecessor, Red Dragon is a compelling addition to the Hannibal Lecter saga. While a lot of franchises may have a prequel in there is only one that I love so much that I feature 2 on my list. Coming in at number 6 is Rogue One. I don't think anyone really needed to hear the story of how the rebels stole the battle plans to destroy the Death Star and got them to Princess Leia just before Star Wars began, or at least we didn't know that we needed to hear that story. Rogue One might very well be the best Star Wars movie since Disney took over. The characters are all strong, and for the first time, it really felt like there was a war happening in Star Wars. And of course, we got this epic Darth Vader beatdown. And finally, without Rogue One, we would have never had the amazing TV show Andor. Before I continue on with my ranking, I recently had a chance to sit down and talk with one of the stars of A Quiet Place Day One, Joseph Quinn. Take a look. I mean, you've already been a part of Stranger Things, you're going to be part of the Fantastic Four, but what does it feel like to be a part of the Quiet Place universe?
Feels wonderful to be a part of this franchise. I think it's a franchise that people have a lot of reverence for and a very loyal fan base, and the fact that I get to contribute to it in any way is beyond anything I could have imagined. I think fans can be very excited to see a familiar franchise and a familiar world that they've grown to love in a very new setting with brand new characters, and it's even quieter than before. Could you believe it?
Well, like John Krasinski said earlier, because it's set in a place that's normally so noisy in New York City, because it's so quiet, now it feels different and special. We're talking about prequels today on the show, and what do you think sets Day One apart from the other Quiet Place films?
What separates Day One from the previous two installments is that it's set in an urban environment. The previous two were set in a more rural situation. And here we find two strangers collide in an urban environment which is very noisy, and they have to be extremely quiet.
Well, I guess that does explain the title. Thank you so much for being on Gary Talks. And now back to the countdown. Much like Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, I didn't initially know that this movie was a prequel, but it actually is. Coming in at number 5 is The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Technically, the prequel to A Fistful of Dollars and For a Few Dollars More, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly is a quintessential spaghetti western that has earned its place as a classic in cinematic history. Set against the backdrop of the American Civil War, the film's plot revolves around 3 characters, a good one, a bad one, and an ugly one, and their quest for the hidden Confederate gold. Ennio Morricone's unforgettable score perfectly complements director Sergio Leone's sweeping visuals, adding to the film's epic feel, culminating in one of the most famous standoffs in film history. The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly is not just a western, it's one of the greatest prequels ever made. You guys know how much I love comic book movies and superhero movies, and strangely, this is the only one that made my list. Coming in at number 4, X-Men First Class. After the 1-2 horrible movie punch of X-Men 3 The Last Stand and X-Men Origins Wolverine, it looked like the X-Men movies might be over. And then along came X-Men First Class, the prequel film that stars James McAvoy as a young Charles Xavier and Michael Fassbender as his close friend, Magneto. The ensemble cast, including Jennifer Lawrence as Mystique and Nicholas Hoult as Beast, delivers strong performances that breathe new life into familiar characters. The period setting of the early 60s adds a unique flavor, with the Cuban Missile Crisis serving as a thrilling backdrop for the mutant struggle. X-Men First Class successfully combines superhero spectacle with emotional depth, which basically saved the X-Men franchise for a few more movies anyway. I said earlier there were 2 prequels from this franchise on my top 10. Coming in at number 3 is Star Wars Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. It was the Star Wars prequel that we were waiting to see. It's the reason we watched through Yippee, Jar Jar, and monologues about sand. We finally got to see the lightsaber battle on Mustafar, where Obi-Wan battled Anakin Skywalker and the whole universe lost. I don't even really remember where we first heard about this story, but it was something that all Star Wars fans knew and couldn't wait to see, and for whatever other faults Lucas's prequel trilogy had, Revenge of the Sith did not disappoint. Yeah, dying of a broken heart is lame, but we also got the killer shot from Anakin's point of view as the Darth Vader helmet comes down and he breathes for the first time. Even now, 20 years later, that scene still gives me chills. Next up is the only movie on my list that was a prequel to a TV show. That TV show was Twin Peaks, and the movie is Twin Peaks: Fire Walk with Me. You just knew that when David Lynch set out to make a theatrical prequel to the amazing Twin Peaks TV show, it was going to be out there. But we didn't know just how out there it was going to get. The film delves into the final days of Laura Palmer, the enigmatic figure whose murder catalyzes the events of the TV series. Lynch's direction is, of course, surreal, blending horror, mystery, and the supernatural in a deeply unsettling narrative. Cheryl Lee's performance as Laura Palmer is haunting and powerful, offering a raw and intimate portrayal of a young woman trapped in a web of trauma and darkness. Fire Walk with Me is not an easy watch. Its graphic content and fragmented narrative may alienate some viewers. However, it provides essential context for fans of the series. While divisive upon release, Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me has gained appreciation over time for its bold storytelling and Lynch's uncompromising vision, and is one of the greatest prequels ever made. And now for number one. This isn't really going to surprise anybody who's been watching this show. My favorite prequel of all time, Rise of the Planet of the Apes. Rise of the Planet of the Apes, released in 2011 and directed by Rupert Wyatt, serves as a compelling reboot and origin story for the iconic franchise. The film stars James Franco as Will Rodman, a scientist developing a cure for Alzheimer's, who inadvertently creates a superintelligent ape named Caesar, played brilliantly by Andy Serkis through groundbreaking motion capture technology. The narrative is emotionally engaging, exploring themes of intelligence, freedom, and the ethical implications of scientific experimentation. The relationship between Will and Caesar forms the film's emotional core, driving the plot toward a powerful and dramatic climax.
Caesar is home.
I already dedicated a whole episode to this franchise, and one of the only reasons we still talk about this franchise today is because of this movie. Rise of the Planet of the Apes, simply put, is the best prequel ever made. Before I move over to my favorite prequels from television shows, here is my interview with the director of Strangers Chapter 1, Renny Harlin. We're discussing prequels today, and not only did you direct a prequel to The Strangers, you directed 3 prequels at once. What was that like?
I loved it. I love a challenge. But for the whole crew and the cast, it was a really unique situation where we could literally move within one day from a scene where somebody's covered in blood with torn clothes to 2 hours later being pristine, beautiful hair, beautiful clothes, world open to them and everything looking sunny and nice, and then back to horror. So I made emotional charts for the actors to follow at a scale of 0 to 10 emotions, and figuring out in each scene where you are emotionally exactly, so that we have a consistent arc within 3 movies.
I know the movie freaked me out, but why do you think The Strangers is so scary?
I think that there's zombie films and there's vampire things and there's supernatural things. But to me, the scariest is realistic horror, because as the audience, you can relate to that and you can feel like that could be me in that situation. And that, to me, was the key to the 3 the Strangers movies, is to always keep it real.
I mean, you've directed a lot of awesome action movies like Skyscraper, Die Hard 2, or even a comedy like Ford Fairlane. But you've also directed other horror films like Nightmare on Elm Street 4 or the Exorcist prequel. What's different about shooting horror films than any other genre?
I think there are certain genres that the audience really enjoys seeing in a movie theater. And one of the strongest ones is horror films. And there's something about that experience that, first of all, seeing it alone at home is too scary. And secondly, you just don't get that communal experience, which is when there's fellow moviegoers and there's your partner and friends and so on. You are in that dark world of the movie theater, and you and the silver screen, and you get to relate to the story and the characters. You get to put yourself into the story. You get to live those cathartic experiences safely in your seat. You get to gasp and scream and then laugh a little bit because you're a little bit embarrassed that you screamed, but you realize everybody else jumped as well. Mm-hmm. So it's almost like a party in the movie theater. And that's why I think the only real great way to see a horror movie is in the theater.
Well, I've got to say, I've enjoyed your movies for years. Thank you so much for being on Gary Talks.
Thank you.
When it comes to prequels, in movie form, there were tons and tons and tons to choose from. But in television, there weren't quite as many. There were probably more than I thought of, but not really enough to make a top 10 I was happy about. So instead, we'll go over my top 5 favorite TV prequels. Coming in at number 5 is one that's on right now, and that's House of the Dragon. I know the show is just in its second season, and it's not like a Game of Thrones show hasn't bungled the ending before, but I just really enjoy House of the Dragon. With Game of Thrones, we got to see so much of the politicking of the large houses, except for the Targaryens, and here we get to see their civil war in all of its glory. There are some great characters, and while I don't think it'll top the original Game of Thrones, I certainly feel it will end better. While House of the Dragon was a prequel to another TV show, number 4 is a prequel to a movie. The movie was Psycho, and the TV show was Bates Motel. Bates Motel is a thrilling and captivating series that serves as a prequel to Alfred Hitchcock's classic film, Psycho. The show delves deep into the complex and disturbing relationship between Norma Bates and her son Norman, exploring the events that led to Norman's descent into madness. The series is beautifully shot with a moody and atmospheric setting that perfectly captures the eerie ambiance of the iconic Bates Motel. And sure, I'm a little biased since my better half and I got to attend a special Emmy event at the real Bates Motel, and live to tell about it. Next up is a show that maybe wasn't technically a prequel to a pre-existing movie or franchise or anything like that, but it was the origin and prequel to this character, Superman. Coming in at number 3, Smallville. Smallville is a captivating and long-running series that explores the early years of Superman, or Clark Kent, as he navigates high school, relationships, and his emerging superpowers. The show cleverly uses the setting of Smallville, Kansas as a metaphor for Clark's journey of self-discovery and the challenges he faces in trying to fit in while also being different. Tom Welling delivers a strong performance as Clark Kent, capturing the character's earnestness and inner turmoil as he grapples with his destiny. The supporting cast is also impressive, with my personal favorite Lex Luthor, Michael Rosenbaum. The no tights, no flights rule sometimes was annoying and the show wasn't perfect, but at a time when there wasn't much superhero output, Smallville was one of my favorite things on TV. So if Red Dragon was a remake of Manhunter, then my number 2 show was also kind of a remake of Red Dragon and Manhunter, and told some stuff even before that. I'm talking about Hannibal. I'll start by saying that I hated the ending of Hannibal. It was almost so bad that it ruined the show, but the rest of the show was so strong, it still holds up as one of the greatest prequels ever. Hannibal basically takes place right before Red Dragon and sort of through Red Dragon, as we follow Will Graham and Dr. Hannibal Lecter. I never thought anyone would top Anthony Hopkins, and no one does, but Mads Mikkelsen delivers a brilliant performance as Lecter, capturing the character's eerie charm and terrifying intellect. Hugh Dancy is equally impressive as Will Graham, a troubled profiler who struggles with his own dark impulses, and their intricate dance of manipulation and trust keeps viewers on the edge of their seats. The show masterfully blends elements of psychological thriller, crime drama, and horror to create a unique viewing experience that is both disturbing and thought-provoking. Now, the least shocking reveal of all time, my favorite prequel ever made, duh, is Better Call Saul. Anyone that knows me knows that Breaking Bad is my favorite TV show of all time, and when it was announced they were doing a spin-off about Saul Goodman, I was worried. Then, when it was announced it would mostly be a prequel that also touches on Saul post-Breaking Bad, I was even more dubious. But in Vince Gilligan and Peter Gould I trust, and they rewarded all of us with the greatest prequel series ever made. One so strong people argue if it's better than Breaking Bad. For the record, I say no. The performances are outstanding, especially Bob Odenkirk, delivering a nuanced portrayal of Jimmy McGill and Saul Goodman. The writing is sharp and intelligent, with each episode building upon the previous one. It's a show that rewards patient viewing and careful attention to detail, and it stands as a worthy prequel to the greatest TV show of all time. We're almost out of time, but before I leave, I wanted to share with you my interview with the director of a phenomenal horror film, The First Omen, Arkasha Stevenson. We're looking at prequels today on Gary Talks, and I'd like to find out what made you want to direct a prequel to one of the greatest horror films of all time, The Omen.
Yeah, well, what I really love about this film is that I think that while it answers these big questions, like that I had as an Omen fan growing up, like where does Damien come from? And I like to think that we had our own message and our own voice with the First Omen, but something that fits within the franchise. And still, like for fans, there's still going to be lots of fun Easter eggs, and we do dovetail into the 1976 version in a really fun way.
One of the things I really enjoyed about the movie was that we got to see some of the old characters from the first movie. What was that like as a director?
I was always curious as an Omen fan about who Father Brennan was and his character arc, and I think Ralph Ineson did such an amazing job with showing us that journey. And, I was also really enthralled as a kid with the 666 mark. And so what was really fun on this project was getting to explore the mythology of the 666 even more.
Well, I mean, obviously, Richard Donner's Omen was a big influence on the look of the film, but were there any other films that influenced your vision?
Yeah, it's hard to pin them down. I feel like every movie I've ever seen in my whole life is somehow popping up on screen, consciously or not consciously. But, what we did look at a lot was the Alan Pakula-Gordon Willis collaboration. So like one thing that was a huge visual reference, but also a real character and pacing reference for us was Clute with Jane Fonda. I think that film is so beautiful and also subverts your expectations of what you think a psychological thriller or a horror film would be, because it focuses so much on character.
I got to say, I thought it looked great. I thought it was a really compelling prequel, and you did a great job. Thank you so much for being on Gary Talks. That's it for this week. As always, you guys can check me out on GaryTalks.tv. I have links to all my socials. You can message me, leave comments. What are your favorite prequels? Which ones can't you stand? Next week, even though we all complain about them, I'm still going to talk about them, and that's sequels. I'm going to talk about my favorite sequels in TV, movies, and music with special guests from Twisters, Glenn Powell and Frank Marshall, and from My Spy the Eternal City, Chloe Coleman. I'll see you guys next week.
From capes to tapes, Gary's on the case. He's breaking down each scene, every place. On Gary Talks, he's quick with his peculiar wit. From plot twists to the comic strips, Gary's